What if the definitive answer to your life's deepest, most agonizing question? I mean, finding your life's purpose wasn't hiding in some dense, thousand-page philosophy book.
Oh, right. Like, you usually expect it to be in some impossible-to-read text.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if it was actually sitting inside a simple, repetitive script designed to teach English to beginners?
It sounds like a paradox, honestly. We're so conditioned to believe that complex human dilemmas require equally complex academic solutions.
Yeah, we really are. And when you, the listener, start wrestling with this whole concept of meaning, it's just so easy to get completely overwhelmed.
Oh, absolutely.
You assume you need to like hike up a mountain or meditate for a decade or parse through some really dense translation of Nietzsche. But today, welcome to this deep dive because we are doing something radically different.
Right. Today's source material is fascinating. It was literally written to teach basic English vocabulary.
Basic vocabulary, and yet beneath those incredibly simple sentences is an absolute masterclass on identifying your purpose.
Yeah, and what's so cool here is how the simplicity of the language actually works to its advantage. By deliberately stripping away the academic jargon and, the psychological buzzwords, the text bypasses our intellectual defense
It
mechanism.
sneaks right past the ego.
Exactly. It forces us to look at the mechanics of purpose without all the usual noise. So our objective today is to really distill the essence of finding meaning into actionable, understandable concepts.
And we're going to pay special attention to extracting genuine growth out of life's most painful moments. But because we are dealing with concepts that require real reflection, we're going to take this at a very deliberate, moderate pace.
Yeah, no rushing today.
None at all. We aren't going to fire 100 complex theories at you. We're going to unpack this slowly, step by step, so you can actually map these insights onto your own life.
That's the best way to do it. So let's unpack this. Before we can even begin to explore how to find meaning in our darkest hours, we first have to demystify what purpose actually looks like on, say, a boring, mundane Tuesday morning.
Right, because if you define purpose as this world-changing, monumental achievement like, I don't know, eradicating a disease or becoming a billionaire philanthropist, you instantly alienate 99% of the population.
You do. And the text offers this beautifully grounded definition instead. It defines purpose simply as your why.
Your why. Just that simple.
Yeah, it's just the underlying reason you get out of bed. It's the thing that makes you feel both happy and useful.
Which sounds suspiciously like that famous start with why concept. But what I love about this English lesson is that it doesn't apply it to, corporate leadership or building a brand.
No, it brings it right down to the neighborhood level.
Exactly. The text introduces us to a character named Paul. And Paul hits a wall that I think almost every single adult listening to this has hit at some point. He realizes his entire existence has become this endless loop of work, eat, sleep.
Oh, the default state of modern adulthood.
Pretty much. It's the autopilot mode. You're busy, your calendar is completely full, but you feel just hollow.
I always think of living without a why, like kind of like walking on a treadmill.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, you're putting in all this physical effort, your heart rate is up, you're sweating, and by the end of the day, you're utterly exhausted. But you haven't actually gone anywhere. You're just spinning a rubber belt.
Yeah, you're stuck in place.
Finding your why is simply stepping off that treadmill and walking toward a destination you actually care about.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the neurobiology of that treadmill is very real. When we're stuck in that work, eat, sleep loop, our brains are essentially running on basal ganglia habits.
Wait, basal ganglia? Like automated routines.
Exactly. These are automated routines that require very little conscious thought. It conserves energy, but it completely starves the brain of the dopamine and serotonin we get from novel, meaningful engagement.
Wow, so we're literally starving our brains. We are. The text points out that living with purpose means shifting from doing things without thinking to living with actual intention.
Transforming a routine into a journey, but here's the crucial part. Paul doesn't step off his treadmill and decide to, move to another continent to build orphanages.
No, he doesn't need to do anything that extreme.
Right. He looks inward. He realizes that what he genuinely enjoys, what he's already competent at, is cooking. So his why simply becomes making dinner for his friends and making his neighbors smile. That becomes his life's purpose.
And we really need to validate that. There's this psychological concept known as micromattering.
Micromattering, I like the sound of that.
It's the idea that our sense of worth isn't necessarily derived from global impact, but from the immediate tangible value we provide to our local tribe.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, by identifying something he naturally enjoys cooking and attaching it to a service for others, Paul anchors his daily life to a sense of utility. He didn't have to quit his job or change his zip code.
He just changed the intention behind his evening routine. So finding your why can be incredibly simple. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, declaring your purpose creates an immediate psychological trap.
Oh, it absolutely does.
The moment Paul steps off that treadmill and says, I'm going to cook for my friends, he hits a terrifying wall.
Right, because he invites the pressure of performance.
Exactly. He finds his joy, and his brain immediately sabotages him with the fear of failure. He wants to try new recipes, but he's paralyzed by the fear of making burnt soup.
The dreaded burnt soup.
It's universally terrifying. And this brings us to a massive hurdle. It's one thing to identify what you want to do. It is another entirely to survive the embarrassment of being bad at it.
And this raises a really important question about how we define failure. The text tackles this head-on. It suggests that fear is a completely normal protective mechanism, but that failure itself needs a radical rebranding.
The rebranding, how so?
Well, it argues that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's actually a mandatory phase of incompetence. The author frames failure simply as a teacher that provides the data necessary to improve.
Which, I mean, sounds great in theory. And the author gives a great example of this with a character named Sarah.
Right, the painting example.
Yeah. Sarah decides her new direction, her why, is painting. But her very first attempt at putting paint on a canvas isn't some hidden, savant-level masterpiece. The text describes her first painting as a big, green, ugly blob.
A very vivid representation of the gap between our taste and our abilities when we first start something new.
Definitely. But the thing is, Sarah doesn't throw the canvas away. She practices daily, and while she doesn't become the next Picasso, she eventually finds deep meaning in teaching children how to paint.
She embraced her green blob moment.
She did. Now, I have to push back on this a little bit because it's incredibly easy for us to sit behind these microphones and say, oh, embrace the green blob, treat failure as instructional data.
Sure, it's easy to say.
But when you, the listener, are staring at your own hideous green blob, or when you're the one serving burnt, inedible soup to your friends, your brain isn't thinking, oh, what a lovely lesson.
No, not at all.
You feel a visceral burning embarrassment. You feel like a fraud, and the urge to quit is just overwhelming.
You're absolutely right to challenge that because the emotional reality of failure is harsh. And there is a real biological reason for that. Embarrassment isn't just a fleeting thought.
Really? What is it then?
Social rejection actually triggers the same neural pathways in the brain as physical pain. When you serve bad soup to your friends, your brain's alarm system goes off, warning you that you're lowering your status in the tribe.
Which, evolutionarily speaking, is dangerous.
Exactly. So the pain is very real. It's not just a lack of willpower.
Okay, so the pain is real, but this is exactly why the text's framing is so vital, isn't it? We tend to tie our identity directly to our output.
Yes, we think, I painted a bad picture, therefore I am a bad artist. Or worse, I am a failure as a person.
And what we really need is a cognitive separation between who we are and what we produce during that learning phase. By giving it a somewhat silly name, a green blob moment, the author is effectively lowering the stakes.
It strips away the ego entirely.
Yes. It removes the paralyzing pressure of perfection. It gives you, the listener, explicit permission to just be a beginner.
Right. Because if you go into a new pursuit expecting to produce a masterpiece, a green blob is a tragedy. But if you go in expecting a green blob, well, it's just step one.
You cannot find your purpose if your ego refuses to let you endure that mandatory phase of incompetence. It's basically the toll you have to pay on the road to meaning.
You pay an embarrassment.
Exactly. So if we can push through that ego hit, if we can accept the burnt soups and the ugly paintings, we can find our way. But that logic really only applies when the difficulty is something we actively choose.
Right, like choosing to learn to paint or cook.
Yeah. But what happens when the difficulty isn't a choice? This is where the transcript shifts from basic self-help to much deeper existential philosophy.
It really does. It gets into the heavy stuff.
Because life inevitably forces genuine hardship upon us. Sickness, grief, job loss. How do you find meaning when you're trapped in a dark situation you never asked for?
And the text introduces a personal reflection from Paul here. It talks about a period last year when he was severely ill. He was forced to stop his routine completely.
And he explicitly notes how profoundly sad and frustrated he felt. It wasn't just a minor inconvenience.
Importantly, he doesn't toxic positivity his way out of it either. He doesn't say, I was sick and it was a wonderful blessing.
No, he acknowledges the dark. But he manages to use that forced downtime to do two specific things. He practices patience, and he starts reading more. He somehow extracts value out of the suffering.
Yeah, and the text uses an analogy here that we should expand on. It likens human growth to a plant in a garden.
Okay, a plant in a garden.
You can't rush a
Yeah,
plant,
yeah.
right? And the dark, messy dirt is where the roots actually grow.
It's a classic metaphor, for sure.
It is, but we can look at it through a much sharper adult lens. Let's look at psychological resilience the same way we look at muscular hypertrophy and fitness.
Okay, I like where this is going.
When you lift weights, you aren't actually building muscle in the gym. You're putting the muscle under extreme stress until the fibers literally tear. It is a process of damage.
Wow, okay.
The growth only happens afterward during the painful recovery period when the body synthesizes new proteins to repair the torn fibers. It makes them thicker and stronger than before to handle future stress.
So the sickness or the grief is the tearing of the emotional fibers.
Exactly. When life forces genuine hardship on you, your emotional capacity is being stretched and torn. The sadness Paul felt didn't magically disappear, just like a torn muscle still aches.
Right.
But that dark, painful environment, the recovery phase, is the exact mechanism required for new traits to synthesize. Paul's newly found patience, his deepened intellect from reading those, were the psychological proteins rebuilding his resilience.
That makes so much more sense than just, sitting in the dirt. But when you're in the middle of that pain, when the emotional fibers are actively torn, the natural instinct is to just curl into a ball and isolate.
Oh, definitely. It's human nature.
Yet the author suggests something highly counterintuitive to navigate those dark times. The text gives actionable advice. It says to become a light for others by doing incredibly small things, like holding a door for a stranger or giving a genuine compliment.
It sounds almost too simple to be effective, especially when you're dealing with profound sadness.
It really does. Like, if I'm deeply depressed, telling me to go hold a door for someone feels almost insulting. But the text claims that by doing this, it makes the world feel less dark for yourself as well. I really want to understand the mechanics of why that actually works.
Well, it works because of the neuroscience of altruism. When we're in pain, our psychological vision narrows to a pinprick. We become hyper-focused on our own internal suffering.
We just tunnel vision on the pain.
Exactly. Our brain's amygdala becomes highly active, scanning our internal environment for the source of the pain. And that creates an endless echo chamber of rumination.
So we basically get trapped in our own heads.
Completely tracked.
Hmm.
But when you force yourself to perform a small act of kindness for someone else, even something as micro as a compliment, you force your brain to shift gears.
How so?
You're moving activity away from the amygdala and engaging the prefrontal cortex, which handles complex social behaviors and empathy. You are literally breaking the neurological loop of your own suffering.
That is fascinating. So you are basically hacking your brain's focus.
You are. And furthermore, you're proving to your own subconscious that even in your diminished, hurting state, you still have agency. You still have value to the tribe.
Wow, you can still affect the world positively.
Right. That tiny hit of oxytocin you get from a positive social interaction acts as a momentary painkiller for your own grief.
So you aren't just being nice, you're administering an emotional tourniquet. Now, there is one more specific habit the text brings up for navigating this journey, and it ties directly into everything we've talked about.
Ah, yes, the phone habit.
Yeah. Paul mentions that he started turning his phone off for 1 solid hour every single evening. He notes that the resulting silence allows him to finally hear what is truly important.
That is perhaps the most difficult piece of advice in the entire text, just masquerading as a simple habit.
It really is, and I want to dig into this because I think we use our phones for a very specific reason when we are struggling. Does stripping away our daily distractions, literally powering down the screen, actually force us to confront the difficult feelings that we need to process?
To experience that psychological hypertrophy we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Are we using the noise of the internet to actively avoid the growth?
I would argue absolutely yes. Distraction is the ultimate modern anesthetic. We live in an era where we never actually have to be alone with our own thoughts.
Never. You can just pull out your phone in the grocery line.
Exactly. But let's look at what's happening mechanically in the brain. In neuroscience, there's something called the default mode network, or DMN.
Okay, the default mode network.
This is the network of interacting brain regions that becomes active when your mind is at rest, when you're not focused on the outside world.
Like when you're staring out a window or, I don't know, taking a shower.
Right. The DMN is responsible for daydreaming, self-reflection, processing memories, and crucially thinking about our future and our purpose. It is the engine of self-awareness.
Okay, so we need that online.
We do. But here's the catch. The DMN turns off the moment you demand your brain's attention for an external task.
Like scrolling through a social media feed.
Yes. The constant barrage of notifications and curated content provides an endless, artificial dopamine loop. By constantly consuming someone else's thoughts, you are suppressing your default mode network.
So you never have to listen to your own internal compass.
Exactly. The emotional muscle repair we discussed earlier requires stillness to synthesize. By turning off the phone for just 1 hour, Paul is deliberately cutting off the anesthetic. He's stepping into the quiet and forcing his DMN to turn back on.
He's allowing his brain to finally process the underlying sadness, or to finally hear that tiny, quiet voice that says, I really just want to cook for my neighbors.
Yeah, that quiet voice cannot compete with the volume of 1,000 screaming opinions on the internet.
It really can't. You have to shut the internet off to give your internal voice the floor.
And it requires immense bravery to sit in silence, honestly, because you don't know what your brain is going to say to you when the noise stops.
That is so true. So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, let's just look at the map we've drawn today from this surprisingly profound English lesson. We started by defining our simple why.
We realize that purpose isn't found on a mountaintop.
Right. It's simply stepping off the treadmill of routine and choosing to walk with intention, even if that intention is just feeding the people on our street.
And from there, we learned that the moment we choose a direction, we have to accept the mandatory phase of incompetence. We have to strip away the ego, survive the embarrassment, and recognize that our green blob moments are just instructional data.
And finally, we explored how to navigate the unchosen darkness. We saw that when life tears our emotional fibers, we can use that painful recovery period to build psychological resilience.
We can break the echo chamber of our own suffering by becoming a small light for others.
And we can force our minds to heal by finding the courage to sit in the silence and turn on our default mode network.
The author leaves us with a closing thought that serves as a perfect summary for everything we've discussed today. It states simply, you are the author of your own life, and you have the power to write a better story today.
You hold the pen. The narrative isn't happening to you. It is being written by you. But before we leave you today, I want to give you one final thought to mull over on your own. It builds on that terrifying habit of turning off the phone.
Oh, this is a good one.
We just established that the constant noise of our modern world acts as an anesthetic. But consider this, what if it isn't just a passive distraction? What if the endless scrolling is a deliberate shield you are using right now to actively avoid facing your own potential?
That's a heavy thought.
Because realizing you are capable of more is a heavy burden. If you were to sit in absolute silence for just 10 minutes right now, with no screens, no music, no podcast to distract you, what is the first uncomfortable, beautiful truth your mind would finally force you to hear about what you're supposed to do next?